We're going to move a lot slower today, have 2 hours, and we could take one slide and do 2 hours, or we can go through all of them in 2 hours. So we'll see. Once gave a lecture in New Zealand and used 5 slides for 7 hours. So we won't do that today. All right. You may or may not be religious. I always find some people are and some people aren't. But if you look at, say, the Christian Bible, and you look at first part of Genesis, and it talks about God moving above the face of the waters and the Word and all this stuff, the point is there was formlessness at first, and then there was form. And researchers starting in the 40s really started nailing this down. But this phenomenon was recognized thousands of years ago. The ancient Sanskrit language, the symbols, can be duplicated with platforms with sand, like drums, pipes where you go ooh or make the sound, and the symbol will form in the sand on some of the symbols. So with the Hebrew language, some of the symbols. The symbols will actually form out of the sand. The Navajos used to have these sand dancers that would dance and symbols would form and patterns would form in the sand. Because energy, pulsating, coherent energy will create coherent forms. And we'll discuss that. Now, this is sun. This is the magnetosphere of the earth. We exist. We evolved. The entire planet, all life, lives in a pulsating magnetic field. And this magnetic field is critically important for maintenance of life. And to deny this is to deny a reality that exists. Now, these are forms. This first one over here is a glass of water with like flour in it. And this is the pattern that forms when you put a certain tone into that water. I mean, you literally have, you can see, I think it's a tetrahedral pattern right in the center of that. This is, and as soon as you turn off the tone, you're back to just floating powder in water. You turn it on, get exactly right, that will appear again. This is a radiolarian skeleton. Back in '71, it came to my recognition, I wasn't able to prove it for years, that embryological tissues and migrating tissues were on field patterns. Because it sure doesn't make any sense to think that a tissue is going to form based on some kind of growth-promoting chemical that's over here. That is such a random process. You can't duplicate form after form after form when we know in nature that a coherent field will create a coherent form in inanimate objects. And guess what you start learning as you study biological tissue? That it has electronic properties that is actually, and what I've learned is, what I've begun to believe is that these properties are there because they take advantage of these phenomena. These are the best types of materials in order to utilize these phenomena. If you look at mitosis and you look at DNA pulling apart, you'll see a magnetic field pattern. So what I see, when you start studying biological tissues, you're looking at materials that have liquid crystal properties, just as your computer screen. They are semiconducting. Proteins are semiconductors. This was Albert St. George, I think in 39 or 40, published a paper in Science magazine reporting that proteins were most likely semiconductors. And they thought he'd gone senile. Well, guess what? He's right. Robert O. Becker was able to prove back in the late 50s, early 60s, that the semiconducting nature of protein, along with other people. And they began to recognize back in the late 50s that regeneration involved electromagnetic fields. This, if you go back to Robert Becker's work with amphibians, back in I think 58, you start seeing papers showing up. And then you go to his books. It's easier to get access to, say, The Body Electric, which is more of a compendium of his life history up to that point. And there's others he's put out. I think one's called Cross Pollution. But the bottom line is, when you look at that, he discusses in detail that the electrical properties of the body control the chemistry. That the proper alteration, and when I say electro, I also mean electromagnetic. Okay, it's sometimes just who wants to say out like wordage, because you can't have an electrical field without a magnetic field. You can't have a magnetic field without an electrical field if you have conductive media. Period. Into the discussion, they're always there together. You can create a magnetic field. If you create electric current, you can create electric current if you have a pulsating magnetic field, as long as you have conductive material, as long as something's moving. And that's the key. It's got to be moving. It can't be static. So a pulsating magnetic field creates electric current. It creates, if you're using the right intensity, nanocurrents, picocurrents. Why is this critically important? Your lower settings, in my opinion, are probably your most powerful on that machine. Based on my knowledge that lower frequencies and lower Tesla fields have stronger biological effects. I did work with picotesla fields. We saw nerve regeneration, we saw cell regeneration, we saw bone healing, pain control, on and on and on with picotesla fields. And if you talk to a regular mainstream physicist, it's too weak. It's weaker than the background biological, weaker than the background field of the earth. It's all going to be static. Well, guess what? Our cells are designed to be quantum sensors. You only need one quantum of energy at the right frequency or wavelength and amplitude, or the right frequency, in order to be absorbed. The retina of the eye is sensitive to one photon. One photon. Wow. That's very little amount of energy. But the retina can respond to a single photon. Well, guess what? The rest of the body also has this level of sensitivity. Now, thank God it's also acts like rhinoceros hide to some degree. Otherwise, you'd be overstimulated by everything you're coming across. You'd get near a clock radio and you go like this. You can't do that. But so your body has windows. Ross Addy's done this work, and Joel was good enough to precede me and knock out half of my research studies that I was going to talk about. Thank you, Joel. I appreciate that. Anyway, now this information's out there, and it was good that you hear it and recognize what it means, because you can't just throw random information to the body, because when you give these electrical magnetic fields, you're giving information patterning to the body. You're giving communication. You're giving a power source. You're using field energy as a source of electrons. You're generating electrons. You can do it with phototherapy equipment, photoelectric effect. It may not be exactly a photoelectric effect, but the result of, say, using a phototherapy equipment of the right frequencies on mitochondria is that you get electron transport. So whether it's photoelectric or whether it's a light receptor, I mean, it's all a matter of terminology. The end result is you get an electrical current flowing in tissues of a nanocurrent type. You can use pads, microcurrent. You get down, you can go even lower to nanocurrent. And guess what? You get healing. The body heals when you give these signals. So there is an innate property of matter and biological tissue that it responds to these coherent forms. Now, so you have in quantum field theory, wave and particle, and as I've been studying this for 30 years, I've come to feel that there are no particles, there's just denser field. It's nested field and nested field and nested field, and what you think is a particle is actually just a dense node of energy. That's just my theory. Many physicists think that's also true. Whether it's pertinent or not, it just means we're energy. But when you look at This is a vitamin C crystal. Look at the pattern forming in there. And I use this as an example of interference. When you get two waves coming together, you ever seen water in a pond and you put the waves together and they make these special patterns and drop a little stone here and stone there and the waves, that's an interference pattern. It's at the point of interference, that patterning, where you can hold information. And that's how the body stores memory in a holographic interference field. Memory is not stored in the brain, it's stored in all tissue. That's why you can work with, say, a massage therapist and they start massaging, say, your leg and you start crying because you remember your mother died in an auto wreck. And that's when that leg was hurt first. I mean, all of a sudden you just have this spontaneous blah, blah, blah. Or you can take your fingernail. I actually designed a therapy based on this phenomenon using fingernail pressure on the ear. It hurts terribly bad. It's very effective for opening up traumatic memories. And we go through different ear points, use fingernail pressure, and press until the pain stops. And sometimes it's when you're screaming and hollering and threatening homicide before the pain stops. So it's very painful. I mean, if you ever felt like a hot poker in your ear, that's what it feels like sometimes. So when looking at, I got this picture from HeartMath. I always give them credit because they gave me permission to use it. So I want y'all to know that's a company that sells equipment for evaluating coherence. And it's a software program. But my feeling is the picture is incomplete. That pattern should extend below the feet as equally as it does above the head. Y'all understand what I'm saying? Because I believe that's what the field looks like. And I think this is an incomplete model. But you'll see that there's an inner hemisphere over the heart, because the heart has a magnetic field 50 times stronger than the rest of the body. Heart and brain have the strongest fields. So we find that just the general physiology of two of the most active components of the body, heart and brain, generate a very strong electromagnetic field, which is why you can influence cardiac conduction with properly tuned electromagnetic fields. And I use that in the concept of pacemakers with a signaling device. Now, you know, medicine is wonderful in creating solutions, but sometimes it's like, let's use an atom bomb when really all you need is a whisper. You know, so there are other ways of doing it besides using an internal pacemaker, but it does work, and it has saved millions of lives, I think. But, you know, it's probably not going to be where we're going to be in 100 years. They'll probably have external devices you just stick over the heart and turn them on and do it that way. You won't have to go through the sticking it in and doing needles and catheterization, because the technology is possible. I mean, you can use your cell phone in a building. You can use it outside a building. To some extent and purposes, the building is invisible. Of course, if it's a steel frame building with maybe copper walls and stuff, you may not get a signal because it blocks it out. So, but the body, to all intents and purposes, is invisible to a magnetic field. It passes right through. There are components in the body that will respond, like hemoglobin. I always thought that's fascinating. Hemoglobin has a lot of iron in it, and iron is a magnetic property, and oxygen is magnetic, and I've always wondered if there's a magnetic interaction between oxygen and hemoglobin. I mean, certainly bonds well, doesn't it? So there's certainly a charge effect. So the field, as I've come to learn, can regulate the biochemical properties of the body. So what you begin to understand when you start thinking this and recognizing this is that you can have effects that are pharmacological-like in nature to operate and control certain principles with field energy, with devices that generate field energy. This is why it's so dangerous to economic interest, period. I mean, it's a competitor. Do you think automobiles were dangerous to buggy whip manufacturers? Horse and buggy manufacturers? Were automobiles a disruptive technology? Yes, they are. And so were jet engines a disruptive technology to the people that built propeller-driven planes? Yeah. There's a place for all of it. But you have to recognize, you have to work within the structure that you're existing in the regulatory environment that you're existing in. So you have certain restrictions. You have certain responsibilities. You have a responsibility not to go out there and you're going to claim and cure all these diseases, because you put your entire company and your livelihood at risk with regulatory. And just because you don't know the rules doesn't mean they won't affect you. So you should learn these rules. And when they tell you this is what you should not do, there's a reason for it. And I've been working with this in this field for over 20 years, and I've seen a lot of companies be successful, not get in trouble, and I don't want this company to get in trouble. I mean, you are good people, and you can have people out there that, oh, listen, when you tell somebody it does everything, I believe nothing you tell me. The more you say, the less I believe. So you got people, oh, it does this, this, and this, and this, and I'm going like, these people are crackpots. You know, it's always better to impress them with what they're not expecting than to overpromise. Just think about that. All right. Now, the body has a direct current electric field, and it flows, at least in the connective tissue, if not the perineural. And I said, what does he mean by perineural? Perineural is a tissue around nerves. Now, the nerves conduct energy. They conduct signals. I mean, brain, spinal cord, spinal nerves, signal out, signal back in through nerves, spinal cord, brain. I got a loop, okay? Back and forth. I got sensory transductors. I've got pressure sensors in my hand. I go press my fingernail here. I can feel it, okay? I got proprioception sensors. I can tell where my hand is in space. As long as that loop is connected, as long as there's not a damage in, say, the brain area that interprets that. So there's a whole logic system designed to interpret this information. However, in series and in parallel with the nervous system are other electronic and photonic communication systems. When I started talking about photonic communication about 15 years ago, I would talk to audiences and they'd roll their eyes and they go, oh yeah, he's talking some crackpot. Fiber optics in the body, yeah, they've been proven they don't. Well, why does DNA put out coherent light? Do you think it's an accident? Oh, it just ran. Look, whether you want to call it God or evolution or whatever, these things don't occur by accident. These properties don't exist because they're just random things. Oh yeah, that happens. They talk about junk DNA. What that means is junk mentality. They just don't know what it is, so they call it junk DNA. But there's no junk there. It may be DNA we do not understand, which would be a better term than junk DNA. But when you start looking at, oh, that's just an anomaly, or that's just a side effect, or whatever, or that's just an insignificant finding. It's the insignificant findings that people investigate that get the Nobel Prizes. I mean, Fritz Popp should get a Nobel Prize for his work with biophotonics in a realistic world. But what happens is, researchers have begun to recognize that changes occur in the field before they occur in the chemistry. Which means that if you can affect the field structure, you can affect the physical properties of the body. Why? Because in my model, the physical properties of the body are patterned by the field. So if you can repattern the field in a healthy manner, over time, you're repatterning the body. If you look at some of the work that's been done, they say that every atom in your body is replaced every 7 years, or whether it's 9 or whatever. That means there's nothing of you 9 years later that started with. So how come you still have a somewhat similar? Because there's a pattern field. Okay, this little piece is taken out, something else is stuck in there. Well, it's a lot better if you put healthy things in there than, oh, let's put some mercury in that spot. Let's put some lead here. Let's put some cadmium over here. You don't want to do that. Well, PCBs maybe. So what we find is theoretically disease and healing manifest in the matrix prior to the physical. And why does body work? Why do people have responses? Oh, it's a placebo effect. Hey, you call it what you want. I think the placebo effect is extremely misunderstood. You can also call it mind-body physics. We label something that's very powerful. I mean, they have psychoneuroimmunology is also would take up the placebo effect, if you want to look at it. The psychobiological physics. But the point is, mind-body field interaction is what you're talking about. The mind interacts with the physical part of the body, and they leave out the field because they don't really understand that part of it. But it's a mind-body field interaction. So there are biological effects just occurring if you go into a relaxation response in practice. Now that's a real physiological response. You can teach yourself to relax, calm your heart rate. I think Anja can hook you up with the neurofeedback equipment and actually show you brainwave changes as she teaches you different relaxation techniques. Now, is this a placebo effect, or are you learning how to modify physiological processes in your body with thought form? Think about it. All right. So, reorganization of damaged energy matrix might be a facilitator of healing. So if we look at, say, a communication system, we have cells over here on the right side of the screen, and they've got these, the way I did it, those purple lines represent not only physical linkages as well as electronic linkages. So just keep that in mind. And what happens is cells in a healthy matrix, say a tissue, are connected to other cells. They operate in conjunction with other cells. They're not operating alone, doing their own thing like a wild teenager. They're in the family. They're doing things together. They're listening to others. When they get out of that and start doing their own thing, they call it cancer. We call it tumor growth. Because one thing that happens in tumor growth is the cells lose their external control. See, tumors are controlled externally by the communication with other cells. It's when they lose that ability to communicate with other cells that they start growing in a wild, uncontrolled fashion. That's part of the process of tumor transformation. And it's a cell membrane process, not a nuclear process. It's quite fascinating. The Germans proved this over about a 40-year period. I forgot the name of the doctor. He spent extensive research over 40 years. It's in one of my books, proving this. And what happens is when you disrupt the matrix, you have processes. You interfere with energy production. You interfere with protein synthesis, replication, DNA repair. All these things occur, and so you want to be able to provide the energy matrix as a starting point, because that's kind of like the underlying principle, the foundation. Your energy matrix precedes your physical matrix. Are y'all following me on this? And the proper field strength with the proper intensity and wavelengths, waveform, will create or strengthen that energy matrix. And through that matrix being strengthened, you can then come in, and the part of my lecture today is going to pound into your head something that I mentioned yesterday, but it kind of passed over most of you. If you don't put the construction materials on board, you're only doing 1/10 of the job. You could have 9 times better effect. You could exponentially improve your responses by learning what materials should be used, in which cases, and when to use them. You know, just mention this and I'll move on. We'll go back to it later. You want to figure out when the peak level is going to occur. So if I take this protein powder, it's going to hit my bloodstream in 45 minutes. Well, if I want to give somebody a treatment, I want to give them the protein powder 45 minutes before I start the treatment. So it'll be in the bloodstream when I activate these mechanisms. And I'm going to go over these mechanisms in a few minutes of why that's important. But now I have construction materials available at the time that I need it, in the place that I need it. Because if you don't have them in the right place, they're useless. If you're building a hotel in Hong Kong and you got everything shipped to Orlando, do you have a problem? Well, where are those tiles for the roof? Or the new Hilton we're building? Oh, we have them over at Disney World. I'm in Hong Kong. We're at 9,000 kilometers or 12,000 kilometers away than Disney World. We don't need them in Disney World. We need them in Hong Kong. Why, are you an idiot? Who put this together? Sir, you're the one that signed the shipping form. Oh, okay. I must have been drunk. Whatever. Underlying mechanisms. The molecules of the body are constantly vibrating at specific frequency rates. We mentioned that. It's called resonance. Remember that? You know, it's kind of easy to remember because, I mean, like one of the names of your equipment is called resonance. That's like, well, I'm going to get that one down. I'm going to get an A on that one. When they ask me what resonance is, I got that one figured out, okay? That is the window. That is the door. That is where you can bring to the system at that point. That's what resonance means. It is your doorway of provision, of providing. And so the resonator could be acoustical, it can be mechanical, it could be electronic, electromagnetic, biological, but there's lots of types of things that are resonators. And tuning forks. You strike one, the other one vibrates. Pianos that are in tune. Play one, the other one string vibrate. Violin strings, two violins perfectly in tune. You play one, the strings of the other one vibrate. You're in a bad mood. Your husband's hiding under the table. You're wondering why. I'm sensitive to my wife. I've got some natural properties of psyche or whatever you call it. I have escaped from my home out the back door more than one time. Honey, I thought you were home. No, I'm at my office. It's a mile down the street. I ran out the door, got in the car, and drove off. Why? I could tell she was in a bad mood when she drove in the driveway. I could feel it. I'm like, oh God, I don't like this feeling. You ever been with somebody and all of a sudden you started cringing inside because you just could feel negative energy or whatever? Or have you been with somebody that made you expanded? Wolfgang is an expansive individual. I like him. So is Joel. I like him a little less, but you know. Anyway, the point is they're expansive people. When you're around them, you kind of feel lifted up, don't you? You feel more open, more broadened. You feel, wow, opportunities. You know, all of a sudden, then you go home and you're back to your husband or your wife or your uncle, aunt, and you're still wasting your time with that equipment company. You know, God, bring you down, bring you down, bring you down, bring you down. Then you get on the phone with somebody and go, oh, well, I really needed this to lift up today. I really need to be on this phone call. Y'all should, I know y'all have a phone call system. Y'all should use it because you need those sometimes just to help you through those hard days. This is stuff that makes businesses work. So tuning forks, use of frequencies that match biological resonance promote healing. What a shock. I mean, it's like, you didn't need me to come up here and tell you this. You already know this. But what does it do? Restoration or provision of electron flow, which is what you're doing. When you're doing a magnetic conduction process, you're creating micro or nano currents of energy at a cellular level and between cells, okay? Now these cells are talking to each other. There's a little bit of information, a little bit of power distribution. Where does Niagara Falls send its power? New York City. Well, how do they do it? Well, they transmit it over these wires. Wait a minute now. So we got it in one place and we can move it somewhere else. The body can do the same thing. You don't think about it that way. We talk about each cell makes its own energy. Yeah, it does. However, you can also share power. You certainly can share information because you have hardwired fiber optic coaxial cabling, semiconducting and fiber optic in the body. And people don't talk about that in the literature. However, Oshman does in his books, Energy Medicine, in his newer books, talks about the process of fiber optic semiconducting information transfer, power transfer. Very powerful. Pankratov, one of the Soviet scientists, discovered that you could take a light, shine on an acupuncture point, and light come out somewhere else. Different acupuncture point. Now, how is that possible unless the light's being conducted through the tissues? One of my friends talked to me about going to a Qigong show where the master got out on stage, took all his clothes off, and emitted light from his body. Now, either this was a complete faker, fraud, with, you know, LEDs, or he was really emitting light, okay? But you can take historical representations, historical things, and go back and look at saints and things, and they talk about the halos of light emitting from spiritual people all through the ages and all cultures. Why? Because it's possible. And if you tune in properly, you can see it. And if you get it powerful enough, it can be seen. So these are all properties of tissue. Biological tissues emit light. Now, increasing nutrient uptake occurs when you charge up the cells. This is the most important piece of information I'm telling you about today. Because, is David in here, Gilbert? Yes. Can you say something? Didn't you work with some nutrients in the MRS? Just 10 seconds. What happened? Loudly.
We collapsed the timeline of response and dramatically improved the response.
Bottom line is, he did the MRS 2000, and when he said collapse the timeline response, people were responding faster than they would if they just used the nutrient or just used the MRS. Everybody follow that? Now, picking the right nutrients, a critical factor, and all this stuff. But the point is, this is what my research showed years ago, 15 years ago. We started treating neurological diseases, and I give them nutritional programs, and they'd respond. Then I started using some equipment I got from NASA, among other places, and I started thinking, I wonder if I put both of these together, what would happen? And whoa! Instead of it taking 2 months, I'd see 24 hours and 48 hours later changes. Literally. Stuff that used to take 30 days were happening in 1 day. Now, I'm very observant. That's what I do. Pay attention, little things. And one thing you can do is pay attention to your handwriting. Write on a piece of paper the same sentence. Eat different foods. Write the same sentence. Keep a notebook. You're going to notice some days your handwriting is just as clear as crystal, your brain sharp, and other days you're like, was I drunk when I wrote this? Because your nervous system was disorganized. Those days it was, you can use that to test ADD kids to determine whether or not your nutrient program or your MRS 2000 approach is working. Just see if their handwriting's changing. It's a very subtle neurological test. Costs nothing except a pencil and pad of paper. I usually just have them write the first verse of the Bible or something, because the one book that most people have in their home is a Bible or a Koran. They always have that usually. And so just have the kid copy the first verse. It's consistent. Here, let's try you on wheat today. Oh my God, you couldn't eat, it took up 3/4 of the page. Well, guess what? Maybe that kid doesn't need to be eating wheat. You can go through and figure out food allergies this way. I used to do this all the time. Migraine headache patients. 50% of them have food allergies. But which ones are they? Gosh, you can spend thousands of dollars getting allergy testing, or you can, every time you eat something, you can just write something down, write the same thing, and you say, "Whoa, boy, that didn't look good." But when you find something that's making you work better, your brain organized better. We discovered this years ago, because there'd be days I'd wake up and like, I feel really good, man. Wow, I'm glad to be alive. And other days I get up out of bed and go, God, I don't think I can make it today. Oh, please don't let anybody call me and ask me to do anything. I don't want to sit here. Now, if you're a neurologist and you have a medical practice, you're probably going to get 90 calls that day, okay? And you're going to be going through your day going, oh, I don't want to do anything. So it's hard. So we got electrical currents flow. When a tissue gets damaged, it becomes more electrically resistant. What does this mean? It means flow slows. What happens if you stop up a water pipe? Doesn't flow water very well. What happens when you get damaged tissues? Electrically, it becomes more resistant. It becomes more of an insulator. When tissues get dehydrated, they become more of a resistor. Therefore, you're going to have better responses when you hydrate people. Okay? You're going to see your responses improve significantly if you just give them fluids, water. And they got to stay away from diet sodas with aspartame. I don't have time to go through. I lecture at an International American Association of Clinical Nutrition. I'm on the scientific panel, write questions for people that take these nutrition exams. And so I have a lot of input. on clinical and nutritional education with at least a certain group. But the point is, my specialty is neurology, neurotoxicology, and neurological regeneration. That's where they put me, and when they have questions in that area, I'm the one they ask. But neurotoxins are out in the environment. We got them in the carpet glue, they're in the wallpaper glue, they're in whatever wall board, formaldehyde to certain buildings. So you're getting constantly exposed. You need an antioxidant program every single day. And what occurs is these things build up in tissues. So you have to have an antioxidant program. And I'm going to try to do in the afternoon lecture, cover some of these categories, which we started the other day. But I really can't tell you, would you like to be 3 to 5 times more effective or 10 times more effective in what you're doing? I mean, is that something you want to do? That information is available today. I'm not going to give it all to you, but I give you a clue where to look. The point is, you've got a technology with an MRS system of a pulse electromagnetic field system with the right frequencies, the right intensity, and the right waveform that can provide the energy to pattern, strengthen pattern. And it provides the ability of the liquid crystal properties of cells, of the proteins. Proteins are semiconductors and liquid crystals. DNA is a semiconductor and a liquid crystal. Cell membrane material is a liquid crystal. Cholesterol is a liquid crystal. Water is a liquid crystal. What is the body manufactured out of? Electro-optic material. What is a computer screen liquid crystal? It's an electro-optic device. It has electronic properties and optical properties, okay? We don't think anything about it, but you don't build a computer screen on a laptop anymore unless you're using something usually like liquid crystal technology. They may have some newer things coming, but that's what we got right now. That's what the body's made up of. It is exquisitely sensitive to these properties of a field of information storage. Anything you can do to promote this natural property, first thing you do is hydration. You have to promote the hydration because the proteins are semiconductors, which means they're conductive and insulating in nature. The more dehydrated they get, the more insulator they become, the more of a resistor they become, the less able they are to have pattern formation. So if you give somebody a treatment and they're dehydrated, they might not have any effect that day. Just simply dehydration. Liquid crystals are electrical dipoles that will arrange in coherent patterns when exposed to a field. The set, we already mentioned this. These are some of they're in your book, some of the materials that are definitely known as liquid crystals in the body. Bone is a hardened liquid crystal. And it actually forms with resonant frequencies as you're moving. The muscles create a vibratory frequency. It's under 40 hertz. And guess what? You're getting piezoelectric signaling as you're moving. That's why people that are dancers and move around and gymnasts, and well, maybe gymnasts too much, but a person that's not too far into it, that is active, they have healthier, stronger bones. Why? Because they've got piezoelectric signaling causing bone formation to occur instead of bone collapse. And as you age and eat the wrong food and get acidic, your body pulls minerals out of the bone to buffer the acids. So now all of a sudden your bone is a reservoir of minerals that buffer acids, and you release the heavy metals that are locked in. Now you poison your glands, and you start getting glandular failure, and you poison your kidneys, and you start getting hypertension. And you wonder why so many people, when they hit middle age, now get hypertension and their glands fail. Because they've got heavy metal poisoning is one of the reasons, because they're acidic in their diet. It's a whole process. You'll follow me on this? This can be changed. So we got these components that are liquid crystal. They resonate at certain frequencies like antennas. They have complex structures. They exhibit cooperative behavior. So when the correct bioelectric signals or bioelectromagnetic signals are applied, they'll resonantly absorb information in a line. So targets, these are molecular antennas. Your tissues, look at the structure of these enzymes in this cell. I think this is a photosynthesis cell or a chloroplast. Look at the structure of these inductor coils. If you were an electronic engineer and you look at that, you say, wow, that is a powerful electronic system, because it'll take magnetic field energy and create an electrical current because of the design of the material. And that's conducting material, conducting semiconducting liquid crystal protein. That's what that is. And so what happens is, depending on the length of the material, you can use radio wave physics to determine the resonant frequency. How? That's called antenna physics. The length of the antenna will determine the wavelength it receives and transmits at. Or you can use a molecular weight, which is present in numerous books and websites. So you can calculate the resonant frequency of a particular molecule if you need to. And it's done mathematically. So the length of the object can determine the resonant frequency because of its correlation with wavelength. Well, gosh, this is DNA. Does that mean that DNA is like an antenna, a transmitter? You know, following this? Well, if it's designed to be an antenna and transmitter, do you think it might be operating as one? And if it is, what is it talking to? Who is it talking to? Is it just talking to you? Or is it talking to the neighbor next door? It's doing a lot more than we realize. So these membranes, which we don't need to get into secondary windings of transformer. It gets too technical. I get confused about this stuff myself, and I even wrote these papers. The bottom line is this. You know what your radio is in the car? It demodulates the radio signal. It interprets, it takes the wave coming in on the radio, you turn it on, you hear the music, right, or the talk. It's demodulating. That's what your cells are doing. They're demodulating information. They're taking it out of the form, and all of a sudden now you're getting the signal, you're getting the information. It's an information transfer. So signal information occurs. So what happens when you absorb this field energy, now you got frequencies, you're creating a frequency, you're creating patterns. You've got pattern formation occurring, and all of a sudden this thing kind of winds over a certain way when it gets pattern. That's the pattern it's supposed to be in, and now it starts operating properly. We'll get into that in the lecture in an hour. So, tuned antennas. The interaction between radiant energy and the absorbing structure is particularly efficient when the dimension of the structure is equal or approximately equal to a multiple of half the wavelength. That creates a resonant condition. So there is a mathematical, physical, electronic model of why biological tissues respond to pulse electromagnetic field therapy. And the reason is the tissues were designed to respond to a pulsating magnetic field of the earth and sun. That's how they were created. So the proper construction of equipment, I don't think this is your final model. Over time, things will happen. The engineers involved will probably come up with some refinements and stuff, and we can talk about ultrasonic skin dream here this afternoon a little bit, because there's other things you can do. But the bottom line is, you've got the ability to talk to the molecular structures of the body where physical match takes place of resonance, where energy is most efficiently absorbed and communicated. And the structures, there's a protein helix, 7 helical structure here, are designed to be energy transducers. But you got to have the right signal. You just can't throw random noise at it, okay? That's the secret of this kind of knowledge base, is you have to know what the communication has to be in order to be received. If I've got a radio transmitter, I've got a radio receiver, I've got to build the transmitter that's going to talk to that receiver. That's what I'm trying to say to you, okay? And I got to use that. Now, we already know that the molecules like chlorophyll absorb certain frequencies of light, or wavelengths, however you want to say it, frequency, wavelength, or reciprocal relationships. Guess what? Duh. You learned that when you were like 4 or 5 or first or second grade. Chlorophyll absorbs, the sun, colors of the sun, And guess what? Certain wavelengths are preferentially absorbed. Isn't that a resonant structure? Yeah. Isn't that a tuning antenna? Yeah. That's a molecular antenna designed to absorb certain wavelengths of energy in the electromagnetic spectrum. That's what it's designed to do. And DNA, this is the top-down view of DNA. Look at the geometry. Do you think that's an accident that has that mathematical perfection? No, it's not. Now, the National Security Agency of the United States unsuccessfully attempted to put a national security order on the formula for the calculation of the resonant frequencies of DNA. Charlene Bohm was able to get her patent, B-O-E-H-M, Charlene Bohm, and she actually sells now, if you want to target, say, the resonant frequency of certain bacteria or rickettsia or fungal infection, she'll sell you that. That's how she makes a living. But the point is, why would a government agency attempt to control the information regarding the resonant frequency of biological material if there wasn't a purpose? Now, I understand, and God knows, because you can do weapons design too. I mean, just because you can do a healing therapy doesn't mean you can't do an unhealing therapy too. So they recognize this. So it's important to recognize that these things are on a balance scale. And we'll stop here.